I'm Stephen Matchett from Campus Morning Mail, and this is Expert Opinion, where we ask people who know what's going on in education, what's going on. Expert Opinion is brought to you by Twig Marketing, Australia's original higher ed marketing consultancy. Got a brand issue, a message that isn't getting out? Talk to Tim Winkler, tim@twig, Twig, marketing, one word, .com. And thanks to producer Amanda Johnson from Twig, who makes Expert Opinion happen. There was an hooray-a-thon last month from the Prime Minister down with news that Deakin U is setting up its own campus in India, the first standalone venture there by an Australian, or indeed, as far as I know, any overseas university at all. It was followed a couple of weeks later by Victoria U announcing online courses for a market in India that does not want to travel. Big deals for Australian providers, to be sure, but undoubtedly small scale in the vast and complicated universe of Indian education, which Brigid Freeman knows a bunch about. Dr. Freeman researches higher education and policies and systems internationally, and she is presently a visiting professor at India's National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration in New Delhi. Hello, Dr. Freeman. Thanks for sparing the time.
Thanks very much for having me, Stephen.
Look, can I start by asking you to put the Deakin and VU announcements in the context of what the Indian government's education policy now is? I understand there was a big change, I think, in 2021.
Thanks very much, Stephen. So you're absolutely right. There has been some fundamental changes in the approach of India's higher education system. And many of these changes can be traced to the National Education Policy 2020, or NEP 2020. Now, this policy saw a shift towards internationalisation of India's higher education system, which in some senses built on a trajectory of developments in recent decades, but in other senses introduced some new reforms. So in the first instance, India's higher education institutions have long-standing international research collaborations with institutions in Australia and many other universities in the global north and the global south. And the NEP 2020 also opened up opportunities for foreign university engagement in India in different ways. So we're witnessing foreign universities entering India's system with branch campuses in country. We're seeing increased interest in transnational education and other opportunities as well, which we'll talk through throughout this interview. Thanks, Stephen.
Okay. As I understand it, the Australian universities have been trying to build roles in India for almost a generation. In the past, as I understand it, there was a lot of political interference from Indian higher ed. What changed? If that's right, what changed?
So you're right that foreign universities have had a long-standing interest in India, and there are very well-established international research collaborations that Indian higher education institutions have with foreign universities. These are long-standing. So many Australian universities have very well-developed research connections with Indian higher education institutions and other research institutes. And indeed, some of Australia's elite group of 8 universities have established joint PhD academies or joint PhD programs, starting, of course, with the Monash connection with IIT Bombay, and others have followed, including Group of 8 universities and La Trobe and Swinburne and others. And Deakin University has a very long-standing presence in India, and others, of course, in Australia and other host countries, such as the US and UK, Germany and New Zealand, have many international students from India that go overseas. So there are long-standing connections that are based on outbound international mobility of Indian students to foreign higher education institutions for coursework programs at the undergraduate and postgraduate level. There's a lot less activity in terms of inbound mobility to India, but there's long-standing research collaborations. The NEP sees some further extension of internationalisation, and the UGC, the University Grants Commission, has introduced transnational education guidelines for coursework bachelor and coursework master's degrees, which is a radical change. And Gujarat, a city in Ahmedabad, has introduced some special regulations to allow foreign universities to operate in India, which is in Gujarat, which is a radical change. And the University Grants Commission has also released draft guidelines that, once finalised and some further changes are made at individual state levels, would also see foreign universities operating in India. So one of the reasons for this is that the government of India has now set radical targets for growth of student participation, which would see India's higher education student numbers grow from over 40 million students in 2022 to around 80 million students by 2035. This would see growth of the gross enrolment ratio of about 27% at the moment to about 50% by 2035.
How are they going to fund that?
As with many changes in higher education policy in many government systems, the financing of those changes is subject to further deliberation. So that is subject to further deliberation by the government of India, by institutions and by communities. The National Education Policy 2020 sets a target of 6% GDP public sector contribution to higher education. And we see that this is a long-standing target which is yet to be achieved. So financing these developments is a critically important challenge, and particularly in light of COVID-19, fiscal constraints represents an extraordinary challenge for this country.
But one that the government appears to think they must meet simply if they're going to grow the economy, to lift people out of poverty.
It's certainly an aspirational target. It reflects the fact that there is a large amount of unmet demand for higher education. And it also reflects the fact that over the last 50 years, the school education population has grown tremendously. So not only are there drivers from a demographic perspective, there are also economic drivers that would see increasing the number of higher education students as a key priority for this government.
It must have been a significant achievement for a national government to get something like this through in a system that must have lots of players and lots of interests.
It's certainly a very diverse sector. There's over 50,000 higher education institutions. It's extraordinarily diverse, this system. There are many private and public players, and this government of India, NEP 2020, went through many rounds of consultation and submissions, and it comes many decades after the most recent education policy, which was 1986. So it's been a long process, many consultations, an expectation of a new policy, NEP 2020, which importantly has a very long-term horizon. So it sets up a program of action to 2040. So this is a 20-year horizon with very, very aspirational reform agendas, which are in fact rapidly being implemented by central governments and state governments and higher education institutions. The program is extremely broad for a very large scale system, and it is somewhat surprising, I think, the extent to which that reform agenda is already being implemented. Many other changes will progress over the next 20 years.
Deakin is setting up in Gujarat in what I think is effectively a special economic zone, which independent of state and local government authority reporting to the federal government. Is that roughly right?
My understanding is that the Gujarat Gift City regulations for establishing foreign universities sits outside of other regulatory frameworks for universities that establish there. So yes, that would be my understanding. This is limited to Gujarat, which is in the city, the state of Ahmedabad.
So that would depend on the provincial, the state government being in line with the federal government's aspirations.
So the NEP 2020 is a central government of India policy which opened the door to foreign universities, and Ahmedabad is the first state. Sorry, Ahmedabad is the city. Gujarat is the state where they have allowed universities to enter. The University Grants Commission has coverage of universities throughout India. So UGC regulations would extend to all other states in India. And it may well be that other states then need to make state-specific legislative changes to realise those opportunities.
So what's the model intelligence operation for a foreign country looking to build and consolidate their relations?
Thanks very much, Stephen. So I think the best example is the UK and the British Council. And what the British Council does is it provides intelligence about foreign countries such as India in terms of the nature of their education systems, policy shifts in those systems, and the ramifications for the intersection between foreign institutions and India's education systems. And I think that there is much to be gained by building a better understanding of India's education systems and opportunities for engagement.
Do we nationally have, does Australia nationally have the resources to match that?
Well, I think that Australia has recognised that India represents a key partner for a number of different points of intersection, a number of different industry sectors. And in recognising that India is a key partner, there is a commitment to engaging. Other countries with different historical connections and contemporary opportunities will have different relationships with India. But we know from the trade agreements that our government has committed to more extensive engagement with India, and our government sees education as a key pillar. So we need to match that commitment with an investment in understanding. That investment will inform what our universities do in engaging in this very complex space. I think we have some considerable way to go in realising that commitment and realising the opportunity.
Is it a challenge that we just don't appear a colonial power looking to swoop in and profit from India's need?
One of the key issues that is raised in terms of the connections between India and other countries, particularly Australia and host countries that host very large numbers of Indian international students, is this principle of reciprocity and also a concern about the relationship being primarily transactional. So I think that if we break this down, we can see that there is obvious tremendous benefit for both countries in international research engagement, where there is expertise and capacity in both India and Australia. It is almost immediately obvious that there is benefit in global science. We still have to go further to realise some of those opportunities in terms of international education, where mobility is primarily one way. We need to look at opportunities for mobility the other way, and we need to look at opportunities for in-country education delivery that benefit India.
What for people who want to build a relationship with India, what's the sort of what should they be looking to? Is it bachelor level stuff? Is it higher degree? Is it indeed in vet?
Sure, that's a very good question, Stephen. And there are distinct opportunities in the different markets. So as with Australia's education system, there is some siloing between schools and between vet and between higher education systems and institutions. So we have different regulatory frameworks that operate for each of those systems. So let's think about this a step at a time. I think that the long-standing interest in international research collaborations or global science must continue and expand, and all Australian universities will be involved in international research collaborations with people in many, many countries in the global north and the global south, including India. And Indian diaspora academics and others in Australia play a key role in these international research collaborations, and they can be engaged further in driving such successful collaborations. We need to ensure that those collaborations extend from simply STEM-based or science, technology, engineering and maths-based collaborations to recognise opportunities for humanities, arts and social sciences, because there are a wealth of opportunities in the HAS disciplines that need to be explored for global science or global research collaborations. Secondly, in terms of foreign intervention in the university space in India, it would be logical, I guess, to presume that a few institutions or foreign universities, typically tier 2 universities, would seek to enter India's space in terms of delivering higher education in India.
So what does this mean, say, for regulations in Gujarat, where Deakin is moving?
One of the opportunities which we'll see progressing further in the near future and over the next 10 years, I would imagine, will be foreign universities operating in country in India. So as we know, Gujarat has opened up opportunities for a small number of universities, and we would expect with the University Grants Commission regulations, once they're finalised, to see additional universities opening international branch campuses in India. Now, we would expect, based on the literature around international branch campuses, that many of these universities would be tier 2 universities, And the opportunity in India is for face-to-face learning. So opening a university campus in India, offering conventional mode or face-to-face delivery in India. So increasingly, foreign universities will come to India and open up international branch campuses. Now, of course, this is a high-risk venture, and many foreign universities are looking to the lead that Deakin University has taken. But we would anticipate that some universities will open international branch campuses in India in the next few years. So another opportunity for foreign universities opening up after the NEP 2020's changes to transnational education is opportunities for transnational coursework at undergraduate or master's level, where students will be able to do some of their degree in India and some of their degree in regular mode overseas in a foreign university. This is different to the articulation arrangements that have been in place. This is a genuine transnational education opportunities. And this will be progressed by many foreign universities in coming years. We would see some settling before some of these opportunities proceed, but I would expect transnational coursework programs to increase. So one of the other education sectors which has been subject to much consideration at government to government level and provider level is vocational education and training. And there has been much interest over the last 10 years of foreign vet providers interested in entering India's vet market. What we've seen is hugely aspirational targets by the government of India for skilling at the entry level, if you like, India's population, that have encouraged many foreign governments and providers to consider opportunities in India's vet system. In the last decade, that has included some Australian TAFE institutes and private providers that have tried to enter India's vet market. And the short answer is that this has not been successful. So my research about transnational vet in India's market clearly indicates that whilst there is talk of hugely aspirational targets, that at this point, this market has proved too challenging for foreign governments or foreign providers. We do see some foreign governments, such as the German government, providing technical assistance in this space and operating some vet projects. And we do see some other governments providing essentially migration opportunities, such as Japan, so migration out opportunities. And we do see some investments, for example, by Singapore institutes investing in India's space by providing technical assistance to establish skills centres. What we don't see yet in this space is successful foreign vet providers providing vocational education and training in India at this point in time.
It sounds like it's the job of decades.
I think that is a very astute and correct insight, Stephen, that for questions that relate to parity of esteem for vocational education in India, and for questions that relate to price and costing, that it is a long-term project that in the first instance is about providing investment. So the government of India is interested in two things, which are somewhat related and somewhat different in this VET space. The first is the government of India are very interested in attracting foreign investment in India's vocational education and training space. So foreign governments and foreign providers to make an investment for the long term to operate in this space. And the second opportunity that the government of India is interested in and is actively exploring is encouraging outward skilled migration. So opportunities for skilled Indian nationals to go to developed and other developing countries as skilled labour to meet the skill and knowledge gaps of developed economies. So these are two important developments.
It's very difficult to get one's head around. I mean, it seems to be an enormous challenge. Is it a challenge that individual institutions can make? I mean, say a TAFE system, or indeed a big university, do they have the resources to actually tackle this?
That's an important question. And we need to go back to my first statement that they're different sectors. So the regulatory environments for VET and higher education are very different. It has long been possible for foreign providers to come to India to provide vocational education and training. It has long been possible. It has not been possible until the last few months for foreign universities to come to India to provide higher education. So Deakin University and Wollongong University have put their hands up. Before that, it has not been possible for foreign universities to operate in country. So the opportunities in the different sectors are different. Some TAFE institutes have come to India and tried. Some private institutes have come to India and tried. And that's within a broader context where Australia's foreign or transnational VET is actually very small.
Just is enormously complex, and it's an enormously large market. Is it too big for Australia? I mean, what would you say to us to a vice chancellor or the head of a big a TAFE or a big training provider? Is this an investment in time and resources that you can justify?
I think what we've seen in the last decade in Australia is increasing interest in India. And for Australian universities that have a research profile, PhD opportunities, and now coursework opportunities, both in Australia and in India, it makes a lot of sense. Investing in India makes a lot of sense. In terms of encouraging increased international research collaborations, fostering joint PhD programs, and over time, building transnational coursework programs at the undergraduate and master's level. A few universities will venture into the foreign university space as international branch campuses, which is a very high risk venture. Most will pursue international research collaborations and some transnational education, and I would hope increase outbound mobility of more students and more faculty to India. In terms of VET, the environment is different. So vocational education and training providers, TAFEs, and other private providers are not eligible to offer applied higher education in India. They are not eligible to set up international branch campuses. They do not and they will not meet the requirements to deliver higher education into India. They could, however, consider opportunities to deliver vocational education and training opportunities in India. Now, this involves an upfront investment, a long-term investment, where if there was partnerships with government investment and industry investment, working in partnership with India's vocational providers, there may well be opportunities in the future. At this point in time, the investment is about building up brand reputation, as opposed to building up revenue. So the investment at this point is about demonstrating Australia's capability and competency in this area, as opposed to revenue generation. Now, that is a strategic decision to invest without securing revenue for a longer term ambition.
So do we look to the Germans and the Brits for examples?
We certainly do. So the German government is investing in the German GIS model, which is very successful. And the British Council has invested over many years. And we look to others where government and industry invest in India. I've recommended to our government that they invest in India's vet space. The government of India is very clear that they are seeking foreign investment in this space.
That's a challenge. It's a very big challenge. Brigid Freeman, I know the line has dropped out a couple of times. Thank you for persevering with us. Thank you for this. It is just absolutely fascinating. We'll come back and hopefully you can spare us some more time in the near future. Brigid Freeman, thank you so much for being with us. Amanda Johnson, thank you for persevering technically. I'm Stephen Matchett from Campus Morning Mail, and we're out.